Death has a way of revealing truths that life kept hidden. When gospel artists pass away, the public eulogies and tributes often paint perfect pictures of spiritual giants who never faltered. But estate battles, lawsuits, autopsy reports, and investigative documentaries sometimes tell different stories. From hidden wills stuffed in couch cushions to allegations that shook the gospel world, from secret children to controversial causes of death, these revelations changed how we remember some of gospel music's biggest names. Some discoveries brought compassion and understanding, while others sparked outrage and disappointment. Either way, they remind us that even those who sang about heaven struggled with very earthly complications. Here are 15 shocking things we learned about gospel artists only after they died. Mandisa's true cause of death. When Grammy-winning gospel singer Mandisa was found dead in her Nashville home in April 2024, speculation ran wild about what happened. The 47-year-old had been open about her struggles with depression, leading many to fear the worst. But according to an autopsy report obtained by People magazine months later, Mandisa died from complications of Class 3 obesity. The report revealed she had been found by friends on April 18th but was reportedly last known alive approximately 3 weeks earlier, meaning she had been dead for weeks before anyone discovered her. The manner of death was listed as natural. Class 3 obesity, according to the Cleveland Clinic, is defined as having a body mass index of 40 or higher, or a BMI of 35 or higher, while experiencing obesity-related health conditions. The revelation was heartbreaking for multiple reasons. Mandisa had faced cruel comments about her weight from the moment she auditioned for American Idol in 2006, when Simon Cowell made a joke suggesting they needed a bigger stage. Her grace in forgiving him became one of the show's most memorable moments. Throughout her career, she'd been open about body image struggles and the depression that sometimes accompanied them. Learning that weight-related health issues ultimately claimed her life felt tragically circular. The fact that she died alone and wasn't found for weeks added another layer of sadness, suggesting the isolation she felt during her darkest periods had been very real. James Cleveland died of AIDS, not heart failure. When the King of Gospel died in February 1991 at age 59, the official cause was listed as congestive heart failure. But within the gospel community, persistent rumors suggested James Cleveland actually died of AIDS. His reportedly frail appearance in the months leading up to his death and his collapse at the Gospel Music Workshop of America event had fueled speculation. The truth became impossible to ignore when, in 1992, Cleveland's former foster son, Christopher Harris, filed a lawsuit against his estate, claiming Cleveland had sexually abused him for 5 years and infected him with HIV. The lawsuit, covered extensively by Jet magazine under the headline, "James Cleveland Infected LA Youth with HIV $9 million Lawsuit Claims," forced a reckoning within the Black church about sexuality and AIDS. Cleveland had been a towering figure who taught Aretha Franklin how to sing gospel, wrote over 400 songs, and founded the Gospel Music Workshop of America that launched countless careers. But the posthumous revelations painted a disturbing picture of a man who allegedly used his power to exploit vulnerable young people. Multiple sources suggested Cleveland's sexuality had been an open secret within the industry, with historian Anthony Heilbutt noting that Cleveland was a regular at parties thrown by Reverend C.L. Franklin, where many gay people attended. The gospel community's "don't ask, don't tell" culture had allowed Cleveland to maintain his public image while living a very different private life. The lawsuit was settled out of court, but the damage to Cleveland's legacy was permanent. Aretha Franklin's couch cushion will drama. When the Queen of Soul died of pancreatic cancer in August 2018 at age 76, her family believed she had died without a will. Under Michigan intestacy laws, her $6 million estate would have been divided equally among her 4 sons. But months after her death, Aretha's niece Sabrina Owens made a stunning discovery while searching the Detroit home for records. She found not one but 2 handwritten wills, one from 2010 locked in a cabinet, and another from 2014 stuffed in a spiral notebook between couch cushions. The two wills contradicted each other in significant ways. The 2010 version, which was notarized and more detailed, named Ted White II and Sabrina Owens as co-executors. It also required that sons Kekaf Cunningham and Edward Franklin complete business classes and earn a certificate or degree before receiving benefits from the estate. The 2014 version, found under the couch cushions, replaced Ted with Kekaf as executor, gave Kekaf the valuable Bloomfield Hills home, valued at $1.1 million, and eliminated the business class requirements entirely. Both wills agreed that the sons would share income from music and copyrights, but the property distribution differences sparked a bitter 5-year legal battle. The case went to trial in July 2023, with 2 sons favoring the couch cushion will and 1 brother supporting the older document. After just 1 hour of deliberation, the jury ruled that the 2014 couch cushion will was valid and represented Aretha's final wishes, despite the scribbles and hard-to-read passages. The signature included a smiley face inside the letter A, which her son testified was characteristic of how she signed documents. The battle revealed that despite her fame and access to top lawyers, Aretha never created a formal estate plan, leaving her children to fight over her true intentions. Richard Smallwood's health kept him breathing. When gospel legend Richard Smallwood died in December 2024 at age 77, many fans didn't even know he'd been seriously ill for years. According to his representative Bill Carpenter, Smallwood had been suffering from kidney failure and declining health for an extended period. But what kept him alive as long as he did wasn't just medical treatment, it was music itself. Carpenter explained that Smallwood was so dedicated to creating music that made people feel something. That dedication gave him reason to keep breathing and moving and living even when his body was failing. Music wasn't just Smallwood's career or calling, it was literally what sustained him through years of dialysis and deteriorating health. The revelation highlighted how gospel artists often perform and minister even while privately battling severe illness. Smallwood had written Total Praise, which became what observers called a modern hymn, sung across denominational lines in black churches, white churches, and non-denominational churches alike. Whitney Houston, Stevie Wonder, Destiny's Child, and Boys II. Men all recorded his compositions. His 8 Grammy nominations over his career proved his impact, but awards mattered less than knowing his music elevated countless worship services. Learning that music kept him alive added poignant meaning to his life's work. He quite literally couldn't stop creating because stopping meant dying. Tammy Faye Bakker's prescription drug addiction. The 1987 scandals that destroyed Jim and Tammy Faye Bakker's PTL empire focused mainly on Jim's alleged sexual assault of church secretary Jessica Hahn and the couple's fraudulent fundraising practices. But in the midst of all that public scrutiny, another revelation emerged about Tammy Faye that had been carefully hidden. In 1987, it was reported that Tammy Faye was being treated for prescription drug addiction. The admission came during the height of the PTL collapse, when every aspect of the Bakkers' lives was being examined. Friends and colleagues later confirmed that Tammy Faye had struggled with dependency on prescription medications, likely as a way to cope with the intense pressure of their public ministry and the crumbling of her marriage. Her friend Reverend Mel White commented on how Tammy Faye had taken on the caricature of an obedient wife while actually being outspoken and pushing boundaries within fundamentalist Christianity. That constant tension between who she was expected to be and who she actually was apparently took a psychological toll that manifested in substance abuse. The prescription drug admission added complexity to Tammy Faye's story. In the 2000 documentary, The Eyes of Tammy Faye, she discussed her struggles more openly, acknowledging that shopping had been a kind of hobby to help my nerves. The fuller picture that emerged after her death from colon cancer in 2007 was of a woman who had genuine compassion for marginalized people, including AIDS patients and LGBTQ individuals, but who also battled her own demons while maintaining a public persona of perpetual cheerfulness. Andre Cleveland wasn't really James Cleveland's son. Within months of James Cleveland's death in 1991, a man named Andre M. Cleveland, then 34 years old, filed suit against the gospel legend's estate, claiming to be Cleveland's adopted son. He sought a share of the estate valued between $4 and $6 million. The claim seemed plausible enough that it sparked serious legal proceedings. But Jean Irvin, a member of Cleveland's Cornerstone Institutional Baptist Church, came forward with a different story. She claimed she was the mother of Cleveland's only biological child, daughter LaShawn Cleveland, born in 1965. More importantly, Irvin stated that Andre Cleveland was not adopted at all, but was merely one of many homeless children that the late singer temporarily took into his home over the years. The revelation painted a picture of Cleveland as someone who took in vulnerable young people, but raised questions about his motivations and what happened behind closed doors. The lawsuit was eventually dismissed, but it opened the door to other allegations, including Christopher Harris's claim that Cleveland had sexually abused him. These posthumous battles over Cleveland's estate revealed that the man known as the King of Gospel had a complicated personal life that contradicted his public ministry. The estate dispute showed how wealth and fame within gospel music could attract both legitimate family members and opportunists, while also exposing uncomfortable truths about power dynamics and exploitation. The Nellons died in a plane crash. Together. On Friday, July 26, 2024, a plane crash in Campbell County, Wyoming, claimed 7 lives, including some of Southern Gospel's most beloved artists. Kelly Nellon Clark, founder of the Nellons, died alongside her husband, Jason, their daughter, Amber Kistler, Amber's husband, Nathan, and their assistant, Melody Hodges. The pilot, Larry Haney, and his wife, Melissa, also perished when the plane went down. What made the tragedy especially devastating was learning afterward just how significant this family was to Southern Gospel. Kelly had taken over the group from her father, Rex Nellon, in the late 1990s, building on the family legacy while creating her own sound. She'd performed at major venues, including the Mull Singing Convention back in 1979, and Bill Gaither had invited them to join the Homecoming Friends in the early 90s, an honor Kelly cherished. Her father had died of a heart attack before a planned London homecoming taping, and now Kelly had joined him far too soon. The youngest Nellon, Autumn, hadn't been on the plane, leaving her as the sole survivor to carry on the family's musical mission. The plane's control tower operator in Casper had received a distress signal minutes before smoke columns rose from the crash site. Learning the full scope of what Southern Gospel lost that day, not just one artist, but an entire family dynasty, made the tragedy even more profound. The Nellons had received countless awards, but their real legacy was the joy they brought to thousands of fans over decades of performances. Ronald Winans' miraculous 1997 survival. When Ronald Winans of the legendary Winans family died at Harper Hospital in Detroit in June 2005 at age 48, the gospel community mourned the loss of the second eldest of 10 musical siblings. He had been suffering from heart problems and fluid retention, which seemed like a sad but not entirely surprising end given his health history. But what many people learned only after his death was the miraculous story of his 1997 survival that had kept him alive for 8 more years. In 1997, Ronald suffered a massive heart attack that doctors insisted would kill him within hours. His surgeon at the University of Michigan told the assembled Winans family to say their goodbyes, but the family refused to accept that prognosis. They prayed, spoke in tongues, and Pastor Marvin Winans laid hands on the surgeon's head, telling him to go back and take Ronald off the heart-lung machine because Ronald would live. The shocked surgeon complied, and against all medical expectations, Ronald survived. The surgeon later said the experience brought spirituality to his medical practice. Ronald himself said he didn't see Jesus during that near-death experience because if he had, he wouldn't have come back. After his recovery, Ronald devoted himself to preaching and speaking about his experiences, becoming a living testimony. That miraculous 1997 survival made his 2005 death feel especially tragic. He'd been given 8 bonus years through what his family believed was divine intervention, years he used to minister and record music, including his final album released just months before his death. Durinis Pace died just 6 months after her mother, when Berenice Pace of the Anointed Pace Sisters died in January 2021 at age 62. The stated cause was undisclosed health complications. The family chose not to share specific medical details, respecting Berenice's privacy, even in death. But what made her passing especially heartbreaking was the timeline. Berenice died less than 6 months after their mother, Pastor Betty Ann Pace, had died of stage 5 kidney failure in July 2020. The family was still grieving that profound loss when Berenice's health crisis hit. As the oldest of the Pace sisters, Berenice had been a founding member of the group and a powerful vocalist whose voice combined power and emotion. Learning that the sisters lost both their mother and their eldest sibling within 6 months revealed the cumulative trauma the family endured. The Pace family's pattern of health problems had already been concerning. Multiple sisters struggled with diabetes, weight issues, and related complications. When LaShawn Pace died just over a year after Berenice from kidney failure at age 60 in March 2022, it became clear the family faced genetic or lifestyle factors affecting multiple members. Tyler Perry, who maintained close ties with the Pace family, had granted their dying mother's wish to own a home in 2018, a gesture that meant everything to the sisters. The rapid succession of deaths, mother in July 2020, Berenice in January 2021, and LaShawn in March 2022, left the remaining Pace sisters devastated, and the gospel world wondering what was claiming this talented family so young. Osinachi Nwachukwu was allegedly murdered by her husband. When Nigerian gospel sensation Osinachi Nwachukwu died in April 2022 at age 42, initial reports claimed she died of throat cancer. The gospel community mourned what seemed like a tragic but natural death of a beloved artist known for her work on the hit Ekweme. But according to multiple sources, the truth was far darker. Osinachi had allegedly suffered repeated physical abuse at the hands of her husband Peter Nwachukwu, and her death was the tragic culmination of years of domestic violence. Friends and colleagues came forward after her death, describing a pattern of abuse that many had known about, but felt powerless to stop. Peter Nwachukwu was arrested in connection with her death, and in a landmark case for domestic violence awareness in Nigeria, he was found guilty and sentenced to death. The case sparked national conversations about abuse within Christian marriages and the pressure women face to stay in dangerous situations because of religious beliefs about the sanctity of marriage. Learning that Osinachi's death wasn't from cancer, but allegedly from violence perpetrated by her husband, transformed her story from a sad health tragedy into a cautionary tale about the deadly consequences of domestic abuse. Her powerful voice that had lifted up Ekweme and other major gospel hits had been silenced not by disease, but by alleged brutality in her own home. The posthumous revelations made her death a rallying cry for advocates working to protect women in similar circumstances across Nigeria and beyond. LaShawn Pace begged people to take care of their bodies. Gospel powerhouse. LaShawn Pace died in March 2022 at age 60 from organ failure after 5 years on dialysis. Her death wasn't entirely unexpected given her well-documented health struggles with diabetes, kidney failure, and other complications. But what many people didn't know until watching interviews recorded shortly before her death was how desperately she had tried to warn others. In a May 2021 interview, less than a year before she died, LaShawn implored listeners to take care of their bodies, calling them the temple of God. She spoke with the urgency of someone who knew her time was short, practically begging people not to make the same mistakes she had. Born in the small Atlanta community of Pool Creek, LaShawn had grown up in a strict Pentecostal household where secular music was forbidden. The family even muted television commercials containing secular songs. But according to interviews, the Pace family also had family-wide problems with food and weight that affected multiple siblings. LaShawn's health problems mounted over the years: diabetes that went uncontrolled for too long, weight struggles, congestive heart failure that temporarily confined her to a wheelchair, an esophagus rupture that nearly killed her, and eventually kidney failure requiring dialysis. In her final months, she recorded videos preaching, singing, and holding virtual communion with viewers. Looking back at those videos after her death, the desperation in her voice became heartbreaking. She was literally trying to save others from the fate she couldn't escape herself. Her powerful soprano voice that made "I Know I've Been Changed" a modern gospel classic was being used in her final days to deliver one last message. Please, please take care of yourselves. Mandisa had been dead for weeks before anyone found her. The initial reports of Mandisa's death in April 2024 focused on the shock of losing the Grammy-winning gospel singer at just 47 years old. But according to the autopsy report obtained by People magazine, the circumstances were even more tragic than initially understood. When friends found Mandisa dead in her Nashville home on April 18th, the report indicated she was last known alive approximately 3 weeks earlier. That means the American Idol alum and author of the Grammy-winning album Overcomer had been dead for roughly 3 weeks before anyone discovered her body. The revelation was devastating for multiple reasons. It suggested that despite her public platform and seemingly strong network of friends in the Christian music industry, Mandisa had been profoundly isolated in her final days. She had been open about her struggles with depression following a friend's death from cancer, admitting in a 2017 Good Morning America interview that friends staged an intervention when she contemplated suicide. That intervention inspired her album Out of the Dark. But the darkness had apparently returned, and this time no one noticed until it was far too late. Learning that she lay undiscovered for weeks raised painful questions about mental health support systems within the gospel community and whether artists struggling privately get the help they need. Mandisa had used her platform to encourage others facing challenges, singing about being an overcomer. The tragic irony was that in her own final battle, she was utterly alone. Andraé Crouch nearly got kidnapped as a small child. When Andraé Crouch died of a heart attack in January 2015 at age 72, obituaries celebrated the father of modern gospel who wrote classics like Soon and Very Soon and Through It All. But what many people learned only through retrospective interviews was the terrifying childhood incident that shaped his entire life. As a small child playing outside his parents' dry cleaning business, Crouch nearly suffered a kidnapping. Someone grabbed him and carried him across the street, but his parents heard him yell and were able to intervene before the kidnapper could escape. The trauma of that near abduction left young Andraé with a severe stuttering problem that plagued him for years. Yet somehow, mysteriously, when he sang, the stutter disappeared entirely. Music provided the pathway his spoken words couldn't find. That childhood terror indirectly gave the world one of gospel's greatest voices. Crouch wrote his first hit at just 14 years old, launching a career that would earn him 9 Grammy Awards and shape contemporary gospel music for generations. He worked with Michael Jackson, Madonna, and Barbara Mandrell, bringing gospel sounds to mainstream audiences. The stuttering story added poignant context to his life's work. The boy who couldn't speak without stumbling became a voice that sang clearly about faith and redemption, his trauma transformed into ministry through the healing power of music. Sammy Okposo's extramarital affair confession. When Nigerian gospel minister Sammy Okposo collapsed after a heart attack and died in November 2022, many saw it as a tragic but straightforward death of a talented artist. But looking back at the months leading up to his death revealed a man in crisis. Earlier in 2022, Okposo had publicly confessed to having an extramarital affair while overseas, posting a lengthy apology on social media to his wife Ozioma and the Christian community. The confession sparked intense debate about accountability and forgiveness in ministry. Okposo took a break from performing in social media for what he described as personal reflection and restoration. When he returned to public ministry, questions about his judgment and character continued to follow him despite his attempts at repentance. His sudden death at a relatively young age left many wondering if the stress of the scandal and its aftermath had contributed to his heart problems. Learning after his death just how much pressure he'd been under, both from the guilt of his actions and the public scrutiny that followed, cast his final months in a darker light. The gospel community struggled with how to remember him. On one hand, his music, including hits like Welu Welu and Amazing Grace, had touched countless lives over 2 decades. On the other, he had publicly admitted to betraying his wife and his calling. His death came before any real restoration could occur, leaving an ambiguous legacy of talent mixed with acknowledged moral failure. Jim Bakker watched his house burn on prison TV. When the Jim and Tammy Faye Bakker empire collapsed in 1987 amid fraud and sex scandals, their opulent lifestyle became a symbol of televangelism excess. Media reports highlighted their Tegakau, South Carolina, lakefront parsonage with its air-conditioned doghouse and gold-plated bathroom fixtures. The home represented everything wrong with prosperity gospel preachers living lavishly off donations from working-class believers. But what many people learned only after reading Jim Bakker's 1997 book, I Was Wrong, was what happened to that house. The ministry sold the Tegakau home, and not long thereafter, it burned to the ground. Jim wrote that he watched the home burn on live television while he was incarcerated serving time for his fraud conviction. Imagine sitting in a prison cell, your entire empire destroyed, your marriage to Tammy Faye over, watching the physical symbol of your former life literally go up in flames on a television screen you couldn't turn off. The image was almost biblically symbolic, a consuming fire judgment on wealth accumulated through deception. Learning that detail after the scandals had faded added another layer to understanding Jim's eventual repentance and transformation. He didn't just lose his ministry and freedom, he had to watch the last physical remnant of that life burn while imprisoned, a visceral reminder that he'd lost everything through his own choices. For Tammy Faye, who had poured her heart into decorating that home, learning it had burned must have been devastating, another loss in a series of losses that redefined her entire existence. The pattern we keep learning. Too late. Looking at these 15 revelations together, a disturbing pattern emerges. So many of these truths, had they been known and addressed while these artists were alive, might have changed outcomes. Mandisa's isolation, LaShun's health crisis, Osinachi's alleged abuse, Sammy's stress, the prescription addictions, the childhood traumas. These weren't secrets that needed to stay buried. They were struggles that required intervention, support, and honesty. The gospel community's tendency to demand perfection from its artists creates an environment where people suffer privately rather than risk their reputations by seeking help publicly. Estate battles reveal families torn apart by unclear intentions, while autopsy reports expose health problems that went untreated too long. Allegations surface after death because speaking truth to power feels safer once that power is gone. The real lesson from these posthumous revelations isn't that gospel artists were secretly flawed. It's that the systems surrounding them often failed to provide the support, accountability, and grace that might have prevented some of these tragedies. We learn too late, again and again, because the culture prioritizes image over intervention, reputation over reality, and ministry productivity over minister well-being. These 15 stories are cautionary tales not just about individual choices, but about collective failures to see suffering and respond with appropriate help before death made revelation inevitable. Revelation inevitable. Revelation inevitable. Revelation inevitable.